All right, everybody should know this, but I'm surprised from time to time. There's people that come into these meetings that really don't have a clue as to what Agile is. So great, we're gonna baseline just for one slide here. So teams basically are groups of people that are working together for a common goal, and they tend to work in sprints. These sprints tend to be 2-week sprints, although I've worked with clients that use 1-week sprints. I've worked with clients that use 1-month sprints. But by far and away, the vast majority do 2-week sprints. Teams get rolled up into release trains, which are associated with value streams, which are basically the way that organizations say, look, if I put all these teams together and I make sure they're always working on similar things, we're gonna focus on what the customer wants. For example, I worked at a large financial institution for years, and a common value stream would be loan generation, right? Everybody that you need, A to Z, and there's about 14 steps in that process, were put together on one value stream. There were actually 12 teams there, but it made planning so much easier, right? Because team number 7, who had a very specialized skill set, they did loan documentation, right? As opposed to team number 1, which was the intake process, right? They all knew that people downstream were working together towards the goal of quickly giving applicants a response as to whether or not they were qualified to get a loan in any number of situations. And so that's a good example of a value stream real world, right? Your value streams, of course, will be unique to your business. And we have lots of unique businesses. Met a chap today that was, whose company makes pallets. Met a lovely person yesterday who was in the underwear business, right? It's like there's really quite a diversity of people in the room, certainly at the conference. All right, so let's talk about lean portfolio management. Lean portfolio management is what really ties this together. If you looked, certainly if you attended John Ward's discussion, it was a wonderful discussion about LPM, how to improve that, what it is. And the concept there, he talked about bringing work to people versus people to work, right? When you have teams that are dedicated to value streams, then essentially they're there, right? It's like an operational entity, and work should flow to that. And we need to be talking about how do we optimize the flow of work to these teams. I would submit to you, for your consideration, that it's more than that, because almost nobody here works in pure Agile, right? I won't say nobody, I'm waiting for that unicorn. Somebody's gonna raise their hand and say, hey, we do software development, all we do is Agile, 100% Agile. I'm like, great, that's fantastic. So happy to meet you. But, my reality says lean portfolio management needs to be not only concerned about bringing work to people, but also people to work. And how do you do that in a mixed methodology environment, a hybrid environment, if you will? I think they have responsibility for both. All right. Let's talk about this for a minute. I think one of the great challenges, and one of the reasons why we're seeing some of the challenges we are in terms of adopting Agile at scale, is that we're not putting enough time upstream right here. I have spoken with companies that have 3 value streams, 5 value streams, 20 value streams, 80 value streams, and most recently, a week and a half ago, a company with 300 value streams concurrently. My favorite was the oil and gas company from Houston that had 80. They have been swinging away at Agile and LPM for the better part of 10 years. They still have not figured this out. They still say by the time we get to the PI planning boundary here, it's too late for us, right? What they're discovering is that, yes, we can work out the tactical external dependencies here, but because there's so much work in a hybrid environment that either A, doesn't engage us well here, doesn't engage us consistently here, we need to be focusing upstream, and I would say, amen. That's exactly what you ought to be doing. And this is borne out by a couple of other things. This article from the Harvard Business Review, it's a wonderful article, came out in February of 2021, right in the middle of COVID. Look, I don't know how it is here in the UK. I've chatted with several of you, but it appears to be similar to what's happening in the United States. They've coined the term the Great Resignation. Since really the middle of 2020, 4 million people a month, 4 million people a month have willingly left their jobs, right? Many of those left the workplace, but many of those were seeking different, better jobs, right? And I think a lot of it came down to, look, COVID had kind Originally, it was a little scarier maybe than it is now. A ton of people died. It's tragic, right? And I think it caused people to take a look at sort of, what am I doing and why am I here, right? And look, if I'm ever going to do this, I'm going to go do it now. And it just started a trend that really went on. This particular article talks about 6 factors that really drove people to leave their organization. And as you might guess, they're all resource related, every single one of them. I would encourage you to read this. It has some wonderful suggestions about the fact that this is an organizational problem. This is not a personality problem. This is people are overworked. And not only are they overworked, even if they're not overworked, they feel overworked because you've got them working too many tasks concurrently. You know, if you got 3 to 6 tasks going, there was a discussion in here in this very room earlier today about how you lose 20% productivity every time you multitask. Well, I've worked with clients, pulled up what they're working on, and seen people assigned to 8 simultaneous projects. Well, and you might say, hey, it depends on the size and complexity of the project. I would tell you that's a wonderful way to talk yourself into believing that's good business. It's just not good business, right? So, with that said, we should be concerned about that, and we should build what I call retention guardrails into our portfolio planning guardrails. Another thing that's a real reality, again, I live in Salt Lake City, America. We have a 1% unemployment rate there. The growth in Salt Lake City has been phenomenal. My house has literally tripled in price since I bought it 7 years ago, which is fabulous for me, but it does me no good if I want to stay in Salt Lake because everybody else's house, right, has done the same thing. And so the point being, there are places all around the world where they're seeing very limited access to people. Again, I'll go back to the Gartner survey, where the #1 inhibitor to delivering initiatives is talent, access to talent. And that's why they're focused on retention. And I can tell you, I attended the Global Resource Symposium in Dallas earlier this year. Lots of companies were there. The professional services firms are all taking the position that the #1 engagement that we have, the #1 client that we have is our own people. And they are doing crazy things to retain their people. The #1 thing they're looking at doing is, what is our work-life balance? How much work do they have? What's their allocation? How much concurrent work are they doing? What are their long-term commitments? There's a whole lot of things that they're doing. What we're going to talk about today, focusing upstream, is entirely consistent, not only with scaled agile framework implementation, but taking care of your people.